this video, we will be talking about using quotation marks. And in the following video, we will have the handout and we'll go through the handout. Here's the thing, you guys. This lesson or this explanation that I'm going through is from Purdue OWL, which is the website from Purdue University. But we will go through some other stuff. I moved it over. I will put in the link, but I moved it over to Word only because it wasn't working on my computer very well, so I had to do that. Okay, so let's talk about quotation marks. These are quotation marks. You guys are going to see it right here. Okay, so these over here are called quotation marks. Oh, that was really small. Okay, let's try this. These are called quotation marks. You write them, or we use them when we want to quote someone. So let's say, for example, Mother Teresa. You guys know Mother Teresa. I think a lot of people do. She's like the little nun with white, has a blue sash. She won the Nobel Prize. She used to say, not all of us can do great things, but we can do little things with great love. If I want to quote that, I would put in this quotation mark, and then I would type in what she said. So, we can't, I believe the quote is, we can't all do great things, but we can do little things with great love. And then I will end with another quotation mark, and I would say, Mother Teresa. Okay? So we can't all do great things, we can do little things with great love. This is a quotation mark. This is a quotation mark. So whatever we are quoting, we start with the quotation mark and we end with the quotation mark. Okay? We can't do this. If we do this, then we don't know where the sentence ends. So we have to put in the quotation marks. We have to put in the quotation marks for it to actually tell us that this is what Mother Teresa had said. And then I put a dash. It depends on what, this is because it's just the quote by itself. I can do that. I put a dash and I said Mother Teresa, so I can say that. Or I can say in my paragraph, let me do this. Mother Teresa used to say, and then I would put in the quote. Okay? So I put in the quote in this manner. So what do quotes do? As we see here, quotes, or the function of the quote, the primary function of a quote is to set off and represent exact written or spoken language. Okay? So when we use the quotation marks, we are saying that this is exactly what that person said, or this is exactly what that person wrote. So it's not, they may have said something else and I understood it this way. It is exactly what they said. Okay? The quotation mark is used to designate speech, act in fiction, or sometimes poetry. So we can also, what this is telling us over here is that, so here we are saying that this is something someone exactly said, like in the case of, we can't all do great things. All do great things, but we can do little things with great love. Okay? So this is something someone said, which is Mother Teresa. Okay? This is something exactly. We can also, what this is telling us is that we can also use quotation marks to say that someone, if we are reading a story that's not real, like for example, you guys know the Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood goes to see her grandma. She's taking food to her grandma. And then she sees the wolf, and the wolf tells her to go this way, and then she goes the other way, blah, blah, blah. But what does the wolf say? So if we're reading the story, we can use quotation marks to say that the wolf is talking. So we can say, then the wolf said, you go the short way and I will take the long way. Here, when we use quote, we are showing that someone is talking. This is in fiction, right? In fiction and sometimes poetry. In poetry and in fiction stories. So like we said, the Little Red Riding Hood is not a true story. It's not a real story. The wolf doesn't talk. So in the story, the wolf said, you go the short way and I will take the long way. Then we can say, then Little Red Riding Hood said, thank you for the directions. Okay? So this is exactly what she told the wolf. This is exactly what she said to him. But since the story is not real, we're not just telling a story, we want to say what they said, we can use quotation marks. Even though they're not real people, and they really didn't say this as a part of the story, when we see quotation marks in a fiction story and something that's not real, it means that the character is talking. The character is saying something. Okay, or in the poem, he said to her, I love you. Okay, the I love you could be in quotes. And since you will most often use them while working with outside sources, successful use of quotation marks is a practical defense against accidental plagiarism and excellent practice in academic honesty. Okay, what does this mean? You may ask. I love when you ask good questions. Okay, this means that when you most likely use quotes when you are writing. For example, our writing assignments that we have, you may have to use quotes from somewhere. Okay? And that means that you are doing some research and getting that quote from someone else or getting that data from someone else. For example, the research shows, and then you tell us what the research, that 50% of people are happier when they eat a cookie. I don't know, this is not real, but I'm giving an example. And if you want to tell us, you use the exact quotes, then you would put it in quotation marks. And why do we care? Because it gives us academic honesty and academic integrity. If you worked on something, you want people to know that you did it. Even if someone else is using it, you want that person to say, okay, I got this information from this person. Otherwise, it would be plagiarism. It would be copying someone else's work without giving them credit. So the best thing that we do is we use quotations within the paragraphs or within whatever we're writing so that we do not plagiarize, so that it's safe. Okay? So that everyone who's working on something still has whatever they are working on. Cool? All right. So these are some of the ones we're going to see are some rules that we use like as a standard in the United States. So in the US, this is what we use to be able to quote. And sometimes we may change the punctuation, but that's okay. We're going to talk about everything that we need to do. All right? So there are two types of quotations. The first is called direct quotations, and the second is called indirect quotations. Direct quotations is when we use the exact words that the person said or wrote. Okay? And so what it is, it involves incorporating another person's exact words into your own writing. Number one that we have, quotation marks always come in pair. Do not open a quote and fail to close it at the end of the quote material. Like we said earlier, you have to have the quotation marks at the beginning and at the end. Otherwise, we don't know if the sentence ended. We don't know where your quotation ends unless you use both of them, okay? Number 2 is you capitalize the first letter of a direct quote when the quote material is the complete sentence. So, for example, Mr. Johnson, who was working in the field that morning, said, "The alien spaceship appeared right before my own 2 eyes." Here we see that the alien spaceship is a complete sentence by itself. Because the alien spaceship is a complete sentence by itself, then we capitalize the first letter of the first word of that sentence. So in this case, the first letter of the first word in the sentence is the letter T in the word the, or the article the. So we capitalize the T here, even though it is in the middle of a bigger sentence, which is Mr. Johnson, who was working in the field that morning, said, and then we quote. Number 3, the rule number 3 for a direct quote is do not use a capital letter when a quote material is a fragment or only a piece of the original material's complete sentence. So if it's not a complete sentence, then you do not capitalize, right? So if it's not a complete sentence, there is no capital. For example, although Mr. Johnson had seen odd happenings on the farm, he stated that the spaceship certainly takes the cake when it comes to unexplained activities. So here we kind of have a summary of what Mr. Johnson is saying or doing. And then we have a fragment. So certainly takes the cake is not a complete sentence. And we wrote it into the bigger sentence. So in that case, we do not use capital. We do not use capital at all. Okay? So, number 4, if a direct quotation is interrupted mid-sentence, do not capitalize the second part of the quotation. For example, "I didn't see an actual alien being," Mr. Johnson said, "but I wish I had. But I sure wish I had." Here, we capitalize the "I didn't see an actual alien." So the full sentence is, if Mr. Johnson was talking, it would have been, "I didn't see an actual alien being, but I sure wish I did, or I had." Okay? In that case, what we did is we took the quote and we broke it up into 2, right? So this is part 1. This is part 2, and it was interrupted by us adding Mr. Johnson said. Okay? So, here we capitalize, obviously this is the beginning of the sentence, so we capitalize the I. But for the second part, we did not capitalize the B, because our rule says if a direct quotation is interrupted mid-sentence, we do not capitalize the second part of the quotation. Number 5 is, in all of the examples above, note how the period or the comma punctuation always comes before the final quotation mark. It's important to realize that also when you're using MLA, which is or some other form of documentation, this punctuation rule may change. So MLA, you guys, is for English language, or for English language generally in academic writing. They rely on MLA format to write their papers, which is a 1-inch margin, which is a certain font in writing. So there's rules so that there's a standard in the way we write. 12 points size, like in this case, for example, they usually use Times New Roman or something like that. Okay. So in the case of, these are true in the case of MLA. Sometimes, like APA, when you're dealing with psychology or sociology or so forth, they use a different form. But for our case, you do not have to worry about that. I'm kind of just telling you because later on, when you take more English classes and they're asking you to write a specific format, you know that the rules might change a little bit, but not so much. Okay? When quoting a text, so this is now another point. When quoting a text, with a spelling or a grammar error, you should transcribe the error exactly in your own text. So let's say someone wrote something and they misspelled a word, and you want to quote that person. You will quote them exactly as they wrote it with the error. However, you will also insert in italics directly after the mistakes to enclose it in brackets. Asisc is a form from the Latin, and it translates to thus. So for example, just as that, or just as that. The word tells the reader that your quote is exactly a reproduction of of what you found, and the error is not yours. So you're telling the reader that this is the quote I'm using, but it has an error. That error, I didn't make that mistake. The person making that quote or saying that statement made that mistake, and this is what you would do. So you would say, Mr. Johnson says that says of the experience, it made me reconsider the existence of extraterrestrials. And we see the word is incorrectly spelled, right? So this is the correct spelling of the word. And you don't fix it. What you do is you put in bracket cisc, and then you close the bracket. That's how you tell the reader that the person you are quoting or what you're quoting is an exact quote, and you did not make that mistake. The person did. Okay? Number 6 is quotations are most effective if you use them sparingly and keep them relatively short. Too many quotations in a research paper will get you accused of producing original thought or material, of not producing original thought or material. They may also bore the reader who wants to know primarily what you have to say about the subject. So, basically, what you should know is that you shouldn't use quotes very, very much. You should use quotes to make a point, but you don't fill your entire paper with quotes. We want to know, as a reader, I want to know what you are thinking. What is it that you want to say, and not someone else? I do want the input from someone else, the quotes you want to share, as a part, as a support to your argument, but it is not what you have. It is not what you have to say. So you have to make sure that this is for you, so you don't use too many quotes. Okay. Now on to indirect quotes. And indirect quotes are not exact words. So indirect in the direct quotes that we were using, these were the exact quotes, remember, right? Exactly what the person had to say. Over here, it's not the exact words, but a rephrasing. Why is this incorrect? Rephrasing or summaries of another person's words. So you're kind of giving us a summary of what that person said or what they did and so forth. In this case, you don't have to use quotation marks. However, indirect quotes still require proper citation, and you'll be committing plagiarizing if you fail to do so, right? So you have to make sure that even though you are not using a direct quote and using the quotation marks, you still have to tell me, or you still have to tell the reader that this is not your idea. You got this idea from this person. Otherwise, you'll be stealing their idea and making it your own, and that is not something you want to do. So, for example, we can say, Mr. Johnson, a local farmer, reported last night that he saw an alien spaceship on his property. So here, we're not saying what Mr. Johnson said exactly, which was here. The alien spaceship appeared right before my own 2 eyes. We're not exactly saying that. We're kind of telling a summary of the story. But we still have to say who Mr. Johnson, the person that said it and who is that person. So who said it? Mr. Johnson. And what does he do? He is a local farmer. And what did he say? He said that he saw alien spaceship on his property. Okay? Many writers struggle with when to use direct versus indirect quotes. And you guys want to use the following tips that we have for you to realize or to make sure that which one you should be using. Okay? So there are these two options, but you want to know which one you should be using. So, you use direct quotations when the source material uses language. Sorry, you guys. Use direct material when the source material uses language that is particularly striking or notable. Do not rob such language of its property by altering it. What this means is that we use the direct quotes when there's something very important that needs to be said that I cannot summarize or take away from. It is valuable because of the quote itself. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. believed that the end of slavery was important and of great hope to millions of slaves done horribly wrong. Okay? This is a summary. However, if we want to use the actual text in this example that we're going to see is a lot more valuable than the summary that I was giving over here. Okay? So this is what Dr. King actually said. So Martin Luther King Jr. said of the Emancipation Proclamation, which is, by the way, a document that freed the slaves in the United States. It gave them their freedom. This monumentous decree came as a great beacon of light, of hope, of millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. Now, don't be afraid if you didn't understand that. It's a lot of very complicated English words in there, and I know that it's a little bit maybe higher than your level, so I don't need you to worry about understanding it. It's basically, but what I do want you to see is that there is a difference in saying Martin Luther King believed that end of slavery was important, and in saying this beautiful piece of writing. Okay, so this is almost like poetry. It's so beautiful. If I say it just as this, it loses its meaning and it loses its beauty. So we use direct quotes to preserve that beauty. For example, when we started, we said we can't all do great things, but we can do little things with great love. There is beauty in that sentence, and I want to use the full quote as it is. Otherwise, if I say, yeah, do things, just love, it doesn't give me the full beauty of that sentence. So that's when we use direct versus indirect quotes. We use direct quotations or paraphrase when you use indirect quotations or paraphrase when you merely need to summarize a key incident. Okay, so you don't have to say 100% of what happened. You can just give a summary and say, okay, for example, the research showed that 50% of the people who ate apples in the morning felt happier during the day. Okay, so this is a summary of the research. But I still say the research by Dr. Smith said blah, blah, blah. Okay? So in this case, I don't have to know exactly the words that Dr. Smith used, but I could give a summary of that research, and that would help me and help my reader understand the point. Use direct quotations when the author you are quoting has coined a term that is unique to his or her or his research relevant to your own paper. So if they're using a special word that they came up with for a certain research, then you would use direct quotes to talk about that word as it is relevant to the writing that you are writing. When to use direct quotations versus indirect quotation is ultimately a choice that you'll learn with a feeling and experience. The more you write, the more you understand when you should use a direct quote and when you should use an indirect quote. And I think this would be the same as in your foreign languages as well. Think about it that way. Combine the two. A lot of times what we can do is there are certain grammar rules or grammar things that are known in grammar that are universally known in grammar that work and transfer between languages. Okay, so think of quotations. I think primarily quotations work the same way. So just keep that in mind. And you just learn when or when not to use it, and by feeling and by practice and by learning. So that's it for this lesson. If you have any questions, please let me know. I will be more than happy to help you. Peace.